everybody. It's Angie Atkinson, and I'm here today with the lovely and talented Dana Morningstar, who was sorry. We do this normally every Tuesday around this time. Last week, whoop, Dana wasn't feeling well, and I'm just like all over the place today. Sorry about that. Last week, Dana wasn't feeling well, and we're glad to see that she is back this week and feeling better.
Yeah.
Dana, welcome back.
Thank you for having me as always.
Always my pleasure, and I'm glad that you're feeling better. I know that has been it's rough. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, anywho, for those of you who haven't met Dana before, she is at thriveafterabuse.com, Thrive After Abuse right here on YouTube and all over the internet. Thrive After Abuse, you may find her there. Okay. So we're just going to jump right in. We were talking before we went live about breaking the cycle of negativity, the cycle of different cycles of abuse that we go through in our lives and in the lives of, our in generations as well, so individually as well as in generations. And one of the things that I brought up was I had watched the series. There she is, Thrive After Abuse. I had watched the series on YouTube. Was it Netflix, Dana?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. Called
Russian doll.
Russian Doll.
Yeah.
The series. Yes, thank you. Woo! I knew it a minute ago, didn't I? So I watched the series, and one of the first things, of course, that I became aware of was that, and I don't want to give away too much, but essentially the main character lives the same day again and again until she kind of figures out what the right thing to do is. So she makes a lot of mistakes over the course of this time. And if you think back to the movie, I want to say it was like early 90s or late 80s, Groundhog Day, Bill Murray, same thing happened where he would wake up in the morning and it would be the same day over and over again until then he made all these mistakes. And then eventually he made the right choices and life started up again for him. So I kind of found this to be a good analogy to what we deal with, whether we're talking about in generational cycles where we come from toxic people and we create toxic people, or we're talking about just in our day-to-day lives where we kind of repeat the same patterns again and again and nothing changes. So I thought this would be a really great way for us to start off today talking about how we can change those repeating patterns that don't benefit us in our lives. So Dana, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is such a fantastic topic, and it's such a game changer. Once we start realizing that there are patterns there, I think the biggest challenge for so many of us is realizing that there is a pattern. And one of the challenges with that is sometimes we can, like if we're dating people, let's say, for example, we might have one really problematic person and then two or three that are fine, not so bad. And then maybe another one that's really problematic. And so it can be difficult for us to see if there's, and they all come across in different ways too, the problematic people. So it can be difficult to see like, okay, there actually is a pattern here. And instead, what we tend to default into thinking is we just think that we're attracting this because it feels like a hit and run accident every single time. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have another abusive or toxic person in my life. How does this keep happening to me? And I think through a lot of the these videos, talking to other people, starting to see, oh my gosh, this is how I keep finding myself staying. This is the thought process, the dysfunctional programming that we have, that we're not seeing a lot of these signs early on. And once we start seeing it, it's awesome.
You can't unsee it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think personally for me, it's the breaking of the cycle started with understanding my personal value in the world because I didn't really see myself as a person who had any value for many years. And when I started to understand that and create my own boundaries and stand behind them and defend them up to a point, that's when I started to go, I don't really deserve this treatment. I'm not going to accept this in my life anymore. And that's when, everything sort of started to change for me, where I didn't just assume the worst of myself anymore. And I didn't accept abuse anymore. Would that be, yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Again, this stuff is really not taught. And so a lot of the concepts around this is why it's so confusing is we talk about self-love or valuing ourselves or knowing our self-worth. But I think that there's a lot of people out there that really don't know what that means. And
Right.
for me, when I was back in that space, I thought I did value myself. I thought I was setting boundaries. I thought I really didn't see where any areas that needed improvement or needed to be tightened up a little bit. And, um, you know, just kind of getting clarity about, well, here was my thing is I always saw myself as, oh, I'm very go with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very, the result of that is I was very permissive about behavior that I shouldn't have been. I was highly tolerant to things that I shouldn't have been. Um, Overly understanding. So if somebody was inappropriate, rude, demanding, critical, I oftentimes didn't necessarily internalize it, but I just thought, oh, well, they're just having a bad day, or oh, they've got stuff in their life, or oh, whatever. But it never really dawned on me to start distancing myself from hurtful people. Doing so felt like I was lacking compassion, or that I wasn't being understanding, or that my standards were too high. And there is kind of that weird space, this kind of long, dark road when we start figuring all that stuff out and really finding our worth and realizing, hey, you know what? Like, I need to be treated with dignity and respect. Like, period. Yeah. End of story. I'm not going to debate it. I'm not going to argue about it. If somebody starts crossing my boundaries, I'm going to reinforce them or I'm going to walk away. Like, I'm just not even tolerating that kind of mistreatment. Life's too short. Like, I just don't even want to do that. But then there is that period where there's all of this questioning. Am I being unreasonable? What if there is no perfect person out there? Are my standards too high? Especially if we have other people around us telling us they're excusing the other person's behavior and they're justifying it. So it can really be a challenge to, like you were saying, find our self-worth and hold on to that and get validation from within, instead of listening to the peanut gallery around us saying, oh, this is just how men are. This is just how women are. This is just how dating is, or they didn't mean it, or they had a bad childhood, or whatever. Like, realizing it doesn't matter. That's not okay with me.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Making those excuses for people. I did the same thing. I made excuses for people for years, for everything. If they treated me badly, I would try to not take it personally. Of course I did anyway, but I would try not to. And I would try not to, basically react in a negative way. I did everything I could to try to uplift whoever was in my life. And that was great, except that they didn't return the favor, and that became apparent to me eventually. But what I went through when I finally went, no contact with, my first narcissist was a major, like you called it, a long, dark road. And for me, it was like an existential crisis,
Yeah.
all the things I thought I believed, I had to rethink. Did I really believe those things or not? And I think going through that sort of thing, that's what helps us to break the cycle. I mean, going through the deep inner work and understanding what we're dealing with and who we're dealing with and all of that, when we're talking about not just them, the toxic people, but also those people who, well, ourselves, dealing with ourselves. Yeah. So lots and lots of positive possibilities there, but going through like that I like to think of it also as like a tunnel. Like, it's a dark tunnel, it's long, but somewhere there at the end, if we keep going, we get that light, and then we're able to really turn it all around if we choose to. But I also know that it's very easy to stay stuck in the cycle, whether we get involved with other people again or not. We can, I can't tell you how many people that I've spoken to who are just almost continuing the cycle on behalf of the toxic people, even if those people aren't in their lives anymore. Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where they're just kind of they continue to self-abuse almost. Their head keeps going. They keep hearing, you're not good enough, you're never going to succeed, everything's going to be terrible. And then when they step outside of, that, and they look, they go, oh, yeah, I was basically, it's kind of like remnant voices of
Mm-hmm.
the past in their head. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. So
That's a big thing too, when we can get to that place, especially if we were told that kind of stuff as a child, if we had a really critical or fault-finding parent,
yeah.
even if they were well-intended,
Mm-hmm.
To view that behavior, because through the child's eyes, we take their words at face value.
Yes.
And we're very quick to just think that they're telling the truth and that what they're saying is a reflection of us or a reflection of our decisions. But we can step into that healthy adult place and see their behavior as a reflection of them. And this was all of their fears and insecurities and unresolved baggage at play that was spilling out onto us. And
exactly.
We can go back. I mean, it's such a game changer when we can realize that, like, oh my gosh, here I've been listening to this person who is so controlling and fear-based in the way that they view the world and trying to talk me out of ever doing anything that I wanted to do. And I don't have to listen to this. Like, I'm listening to all of their like pathology, and I don't need to. I can go find other people that are more empowering and that have maybe that are on the same path, that have achieved the same goals or headed in that direction, and turn to those people for support and advice.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be very, very empowering. I was just looking in the chat, and I saw a couple of really good comments from people. This is a good question. It's a little bit off topic, but not really. I'm just gonna should we just jump in? Do you think?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Rebecca says, can you create your own doses of dopamine so you aren't seeking it for others? And in a healthy way, and not using crutches and habits like alcohol and or gaming or TV. And I believe that you absolutely can, by doing things that are positive and that feel good to you. So like, maybe you want to join a choir and sing, or I personally love to jump in the car, and anywhere I'm going, I'll if I'm alone, or my kids sometimes have to tolerate it, I'll pop on my favorite songs and sing like a concert from the front seat, and I'll dance and everything. I don't even care. Now, yes, I do get some funny looks from people when I'm driving past them, but I don't care at all, because those people probably never see me again. And if they do, well, they'll know I was singing in the car. Big deal. And little things that kind of bring your spirit up, like that. Music, I think, is great for that. Exercise is great for that. Loving someone or something, your pets, your children, whatever, things like that. Anything that makes you feel good, I think, can kind of give you that dopamine release. What are your thoughts on this, Dana?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it can help too to make a list of things that do help you.
Yeah.
And boost dopamine. It's amazing. We get dopamine all the time from things. Setting a timer and organizing or cleaning your space for 10 minutes can give you a dopamine rush. Drinking a nice cup of tea, or some sort of like healthy beverage, treating yourself, taking a bubble bath. I love the idea of singing in the car. That's a blast.
It's so fun.
It is so fun. Yeah. Yoga, going dancing, art, playing with your pets, all of these things. And that's the number one thing with all addiction. The one thing they have in common is they do act on that dopamine receptor. So that's that withdrawal, is we're withdrawing from having that excessive amount of dopamine. And so if we can replace that dopamine in healthier ways, we stand a better chance at fully breaking an unhealthy addiction.
Absolutely.
It's when we don't fill that void with anything, that's when we really struggle. This is when you see people, whenever I go on diets, or at least before in the past, I was like, okay, I can't have ice cream. 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 And you're thinking about it nonstop. And then it just becomes obsessive and you feel like you're being controlled by food. And it just creates this unhealthy relationship with food and friends and your body and everything. And, but finding healthier ways to kind of meet that need it just sets you up for success.
Absolutely.
Whether it's ice cream or a toxic relationship.
That's right. I agree 100%. Yep. It's all good things. All right. Let's see here. I have another one. Unless you have one.
I had it and I lost it, but I'm looking for it again now.
Okay.
Oh, I found it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. It's from the Zebra Stripe and says, I would love more information on the narcissist and object permanence, and take it away because I got a cough.
Okay. So there was this, Sigmund Freud did this experiment with his little nephew. He noticed that his nephew was, if he was out of sight, the nephew didn't seem to recognize that he existed. And that he did this he had a favorite teddy bear, the nephew did. And so he would show him the teddy bear and the kid would blah, blah, play with the teddy bear. And then he'd hide the teddy bear. And at some point, he noticed that the nephew didn't seem to recognize that it still existed when he would hide it at a certain age. I think he was like 2 or something, or a little younger. No, must have been a little younger. Anyway, point being that the toddler was unable to recognize that if something was not in front of him, he could not, that thing still existed. So there was that issue. Well, so narcissists, what it comes down to essentially from this discovery, Freud called that object constancy. With object permanence, that means that we would understand not only that something exists, right, if we can't see it, but also that when it comes to people, that we can understand that I can be angry at you at something you've done and I can still love you. Well, what we believe to be true is that narcissists don't have that. And we can all probably imagine a time in our lives when a narcissist was angry at us and showed us no empathy and no concern and obviously no love during those moments. So it seems like narcissists do not have object permanence when it comes to people. Does that make sense? Dana, what are your thoughts? How are you doing? Good?
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. With narcissism and a lot of kind of cluster B personality disorders, it's that false self that develops. And that false self is, kind of for lack of a better term, it's an unhealthy self. It's an unhealthy, underdeveloped ego, I guess you could say, unhealthy inner self. And part of that is it's can be very stunted emotionally. And that object permanence and that object constancy is part of that. So it's, for them, it's, they need that constant validation. They can't handle criticism. It's kind of just this very emotionally immature state of being. And so that spills over onto other people, where if we don't behave in a way that they think we should, which nobody will, that's the thing, nobody will, because we all have ideas about how other people should behave, but other people are all individuals, and, they're not mind readers. And even if they were mind readers, that's no way for them to live, because then their life is not about them, it's about us, right? Trying to meet all of our needs and be what we want them to be. And that's not possible and not healthy. But for narcissists, you act the way that they want. They're able, I don't even like saying the word love, because there's not that deep level of love there. There's, I guess, some infatuation, infatuation or acceptance or approval, maybe, because I think it comes from a place of that smug significance. Like, okay, you're worthy. And then, oh, you stepped outside of the line, you're not worthy. And so then we go back and forth between kind of this idealization and that devalue.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I have one from Audrey here.
Okay.
And she says, can a person be a combination of all the types of narcissists? And I'm just going to say up front, yes, up to a point. I mean, the fact is, the reason we categorize narcissists is just sort of just to make it easier for people to identify who they're dealing with. But in reality, no one person probably fits snugly in any one category. They've all got, everybody has different qualities, right? And so everybody has kind of a combination of qualities. But I would say the same thing about narcissists. They certainly, you might have one who seems shy when you first meet them and then turns out to, so they seem kind of covert, and then they turn out to be like a social butterfly or whatever when it comes to being in larger groups, or you might have one who's like an altruistic narcissist who also secretly, is covert. I don't know.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, they can be across multiple spectrums. What are your thoughts, Dana?
Yeah. That level of kind of unhealthy ego or that need for validation can rear its head in any number of ways. And, but like Angie was saying, I think some people just tend to default kind of personality style, maybe, or maybe it's just whatever they know works manipulation wise, and they tend to take on more of a set role. But even within kind of cluster B personality disorders, I mean, I've come across, there's one person I can think of in particular where I was like, man, I have never come across a person who I would say is equal parts of all four, like right. Narcissistic, antisocial, histrionic, and borderline.
Yeah, good point.
And so there can be a lot of overlap there. I think at the end of the day, it's more about kind of figuring out what what works for us and what we want in our lives and what we don't. If we're staying around in a problematic or toxic situation, trying to kind of figure out like, well, what am I dealing with? Is this a covert narcissist, or is this a sociopath, or is this person borderline? If their behavior doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you.
Right.
So yeah. I just think that's important to know, because a lot of people do that, and I get it. I was there too. Like they get caught up and thinking like, well, but if this person's quote unquote like just have a borderline personality disorder, then maybe they can get treatment, maybe they can be changed, maybe they can down the road be the person that I need them to be, and on and on. And that's that's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's something that you're right. We get caught up in it, and not only do we get caught up in it, but we stay there sometimes because I see people say to me all the time, like, what if they're not a narcissist? Yeah. What if they're not a psychopath or whatever? Well, what if they're not? Does it really matter if they're being toxic to your life, if they're causing more harm than good in your life? If every time you spend time with them, you feel like you can't breathe, or you feel like you can't be yourself, or you're not, you dread when they come home. That's toxic, my friend. It doesn't matter beyond that, I think. I don't think the diagnosis is really that relevant. I think it's about finding people who you don't feel horrible around every time you spend time with them, ultimately. But now, E-Rock adds, I think so. This is known as the dark triad, and I've totally experienced it. So, yeah. All right. Let's see here. Do you have another one for us?
Dawn asks, person in her life has paranoid schizophrenia. Could that make him seem like a vulnerable narcissist? I mean, it could, but I mean, it just goes back to like, is this the person that you want to grow a life with or have in your inner circle? And I know that can feel really judgmental, like, oh my gosh, but Dana, this person has schizophrenia. Like, where is your compassion? And the reality is, if this person's getting treatment, if they're getting help, it has to be a relationship of mutuality and equality, yes. Where they've got, if they're struggling with some sort of mental illness, that they're able to have that insight and that responsibility for it to the best of their abilities. And, but for you to still have your boundaries as far as what's workable and what's not in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, again, I think it kind of goes back to what we just talked about. And what Dana just said is, again, if that person's making you miserable, I mean, look, am I saying that if your child is schizophrenic that you should dump your child? No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that it's okay to get help, and it's okay to, whatever. But if we're talking about someone that you're dating, or even someone that you're married to, and that person, is abusing you physically, mentally, or otherwise, it doesn't mean you have to completely go no contact, but doesn't mean you have to live with them. and maybe no contact is the best option for you. It just depends on the situation. If you're that person's scapegoat and their outlet for all of their angst and whatever, and you're not getting any sort of reciprocation of comfort, or what I'm saying. I'm with what Dana said. I think you have
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Yeah, your boundaries are your boundaries are your boundaries are your boundaries. It doesn't matter if a person is struggling with a mental illness, if they have Alzheimer's, if they have a brain injury, if they have a personality disorder, if they're having a bad day, if they had a bad childhood, whatever. I mean, if a person's causing damage and destruction in your life, for whatever reason, there needs to be some boundaries placed there. The only thing that might change with that is the way that we're perceiving them. So there might be, it's going to probably be a lot easier to have compassion for a person that has a mental illness or that has a brain injury or Alzheimer's or something like that, because we realize, there's more going on here with their behavior, but you still have to be able to protect yourself and, keep yourself safe.
All true. Yep. And I've got a couple of comments that kind of go together here from E-Rock and Monica Walker. And she said, E-Rock says, he says, I was extra kind and validating to my parents, and now I feel so angry about it, or to narcissists. And now I feel so angry about it, starting with my parents. And Monica Walker says, I let guilt trips control me from family and relationships, and I think what that comes down to is that's the reason I'm bringing out those comments, is because I think that shows kind of the cycle starting in childhood, which I think a large percentage of us could acknowledge that on some level, we ended up with people, or we may have ended up with people who were narcissists because something was toxic about our childhood, whether it was, just your parents worked too much and you were emotionally neglected, or worse. So I had a client recently who didn't have a bad childhood as far as she was concerned, but when we kind of started to talk about it, it turned out that there were several kids in the family. Dad had to work a lot. Mom had her own issues, so she wasn't getting a lot of parental validation. And it wasn't like it was so terrible, but she felt, I think, like she was always looking for validation as she went forward. And of course, at the very beginning, what do narcissists do? They overvalidate. They put us on a pedestal during that idealization phase, the love bombing thing, right? Mm-hmm. So that's probably why that person ended up in that situation. So it's not to talk bad about your parents. It's not to tear anyone down, but I think on some level, almost all of us could look into our childhood and say, oh, maybe it did start here. Maybe my inability to validate myself started here, or maybe I didn't feel unconditionally loved, or maybe much worse. And maybe we can already know and identify what the issue was. But I do think that this cycle does not start in our own lives out of the blue. I think there's almost always a precursor to it, and many times that comes out of childhood. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it does. We tend to learn these basic patterns of how to relate to other people, how to perceive ourselves in childhood.
Absolutely.
And again, this stuff's not taught. So, I have yet to come across a person who is truly healthy, balanced, well-adjusted, and that has healthy boundaries. I've met a lot of people that I would say, oh, this person seems so healthy and well-adjusted, but then you start spending time with them and they don't have healthy boundaries. They still have a lot of that toxic programming that we're all fed about. Yes. Oh, love conquers all, commitments forever, forgive and forget, those kinds of things. That without the context of how to be self-protective and how to have healthy boundaries, those platitudes are really dangerous and can land a person into all kinds of problematic situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a super chat from the Fashion Family who says, I tell my 7-year-old your advice constantly. You're worthy, enough, smart, kind, wonderful, important. And she now feels love and validation like never before. And I think that's amazing. That's how I treat my children as well, because the fact of the matter is, if we can start in childhood with our own children, we can break the cycle for them. Yes. We can break the cycle for ourselves as well in that process. What were you going to say, Dana?
Yeah, I was going to say, back to the whole breaking the cycle part of it. this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about, because they think, oh, it's a cycle for me, right?
Yes.
Like I have this pattern in my life, not realizing, oh my gosh, I've actually been role modeling a lot of these behaviors. My children have been seeing these different relationships. And so this is how this thinking is passed down. This is how this cycle continues. And so making it a point to talk to children about healthy boundaries and standards and deal breakers. And, you know, that if somebody's being, that you don't have to be friends with everybody, that if somebody's being mean to you, then that's not a friend. And how to be assertive and how to say no and how to be tactful and how to realize, you know, kind of like just all what we have control over and what we don't have control over. And when certain behavior is manipulative, and that it's okay to set boundaries, and that our compassion, you know, an act of compassion is only complete if it includes ourselves. So not sinking ourselves to save other people, and letting them know, you know what, hey, the world is full of a lot of this well-intended bad advice. And it's really important that you know where your boundaries are with things, and to not let other people, even if they're well-intended, even if it's us or you or whoever, to somehow accidentally knock you off course. Like you've got to be able to get grounded enough in yourself to know what is right for you, what's nourishing for you, and what's toxic for you. Because at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live with those decisions.
That's right. 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have another question for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see here. Well, here's more of a comment, but Jacinta says, yeah, that's what I've been saying in my mind, because I still don't know if mine was a real narcissist. So I was hoping he could get better. And he said that he wanted to, but he was emotionally and mentally abusive though.
Yeah. May I?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I would just say that it's very easy for us to look, when you say, look, this is it, I'm done, I'm leaving. And they go, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize I was causing this much pain, or I know I was horrible, but I'll do better. And then you see the changes start to happen and you go, oh my gosh, you know, let me tell you something. My ex-husband was a perfect angel for the last week I lived with him, because for all the time leading up to that point, he had treated me horribly. And then I said, I'm leaving in a week. And so what do you think he did? He was suddenly the ideal husband for that whole week. He was perfect. I cried my eyes out when I left him, but you know what? I still did it because I knew that he wouldn't change permanently. This is behavior modification, and it's only in an effort to achieve a goal. And once they know that you're firmly back in there, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go back to the regular old stuff, maybe faster than you expect. And so, you know, if Dana and I have talked about this before, where, you know, if you really feel like you want to give them another chance, that doesn't mean you have to live with them while you do it. You know, you can say, look, I'll tell you what, let's take 3 months apart. Let me see that you're behaving, but this is actually what I did with my ex-husband. Let me see that you're behaving better. Let me see that you're meeting XYZ goals, whatever it was, get some counseling, whatever, and then we can talk. Well, of course, my ex-husband did none of the things he promised, and boom, he's now my ex-husband. But people, you know, if you feel worried that they might change, then try a trial period like that. But don't stay in the relationship and expect it to be, you know, to stay good. And Dana, I think you suggested more time than that. You said 3 to 5 years or something. What was it? Yeah. What did you say?
And I also would not, you know, I think it's really important people get clear on their deal breakers. Abuse of any kind is extreme behavior. I'm a big fan. This is not workable. Like, this is so deeply dysfunctional that it would take a person, I mean, they'd have to really want to change. And even still, it would take weekly therapy and for years, if not decades, to even see the needle move, because that's how they've always been. So it's very difficult. It's not just how they are with you. This is their behavior is a reflection of their mindset and all of this unresolved stuff within them that forms their personality. So it's woven throughout the fabric of their very being. And you know, I think the only way I can even start to compare this to people is if you think about us healing from all of this stuff and learning about assertive communication, boundaries, standards, deal breakers, self-love, all of this stuff. anybody who's ever been on this road to truly healing, you'll know, like, you can start turning your life around pretty quickly, but it really takes it takes about 3 years to really start turning that ship around, because it's like turning around a steamliner. I mean, it's not a quick thing, and you're going to keep having these moments of, oh my gosh, I slipped into this old pattern. I wish I would have done this differently. And it's difficult for us to make these changes, and we're the ones that are experiencing pain, because we're the ones that are struggling with how to actually be self-protective, versus the hurtful people of the world don't experience pain when they say hurtful things, because they feel entitled and justified. So they don't have that continual, basically daily motivation to examine their behavior and do things different, because it's not registering as a problem for them. That's
exactly right. Yeah.
So, abuse, it's progressive, and it's a sign of a deeper issue. And if you're going to stay with somebody, I would say separate your finances, and separate, if you've moved out, I would just be very slow to combine households again. If you have children, I would say don't even entertain the idea until your kids are 18 and out of the house.
Yeah.
Because it's just chaos. And the risk, the odds of them changing enough, like, they're not going to change from a porcupine into a kitten. Like, that just does not happen. And
That's right.
It's too much of a risk to bring that chaos back into your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I have a question from Bonnie, and she says, can you talk about what to expect when you go no contact with abusive family members? Do they implode and start attacking whoever is left in their narc cult? And I would say this, personally, I would say, number one, yes. I mean, they sometimes implode if there are still people around. I found that the initial thing was, yeah, right, you're not going, you'll be back. Wait till Christmas or whatever. Someone in my family said, she just wants you to beg her to come back. Wasn't true. I found that there were conspiracies going on where people were trying to, cause us to run into each other when I went no contact with a family member. This went on for maybe a year. And then, of course, they tried to call me repeatedly here and there. All this stuff. But what I did was what I tell everyone to do, and that is, block them on Facebook, block them on your phone, make sure they can't easily contact you. There were a couple of times where I heard there was a threat that they were coming to my house, and I managed those threats in various ways. And with clients, I've seen that happens a lot. Somebody will show up at their house, unannounced, unexpected. Well, I couldn't get a hold of you, and you have a choice at that point. You can open the door and let them confront you or not. You can call the police if you want, and have them removed if you want, if it's a necessary thing. There are lots of, it depends on I know in Bonnie's case, I think her narcissist is an aging narcissist. And I think, Bonnie, in your case, she's probably not coming to your front door. But yeah, she's going to probably implode. She's probably going to, I don't know about attacking the other people that are still around. I guess if that's happening, then that's what you're dealing with. Then that's a possibility. I think sometimes they tend to try to draw those people in closer to them. And as we all know, since narcissists don't always, especially when they get to that point where they're, collapsed narcissists, where they're aging narcissists, and they aren't able to kind of use the same types of manipulation they did before. A lot of times they do the guilt trip thing, or they have bigger, more direct demands, things like that for the people that are still around. I think it just depends on the person. Dana, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would agree. Sometimes I think it's easier with family to just stay really busy and, kind of make it clear to the supporters that, you just really are trying to kind of distance yourself from this person. If you don't really have any supporters, then I would just keep that to yourself and stay really busy, because oftentimes making a stand and being like, I am no longer talking to you again, or you're a narcissist or something like that, just adds fuel to the fire. And,
totally.
It can make things worse. So just, if you get to a family function and they're there, or they show up at your house, you're coming up with stuff. I've got to run. I've got things to do. You just you just nip it in the bud. You just don't even entertain it for any longer than you have to.
Yep.
Avoid. You just distance as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. In my situation, I did say straight up, I was like, don't ever call me again. But
Yeah.
there were circumstances around that. It was, this ultimate betrayal thing that kind of just broke my cord of obligation in that instant. And of course, she didn't believe me when I said it, but I had never said it up to that point. And well, it's still going on several years later. So no
Is she in the
contact.
same state as you?
Oh, girl, she lives about 7 minutes from me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I tried to reconnect with her at some point about 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, five maybe. And that lasted about a month or two, and it was just the same stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing changed. Nothing. She did not grow. She did not change. She was the same person, and that was after having been no contact for a couple of years. So it is what it is. She doesn't know her grandchildren, and that's her own darn fault. So she's the one missing out. You know, but it doesn't matter. She could have known them. She had the opportunity and chose not to take it. So it is what it is. But anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
it's ugly. E-Rock says, today's my mother's birthday. It was barely 10 a.m. and she sent me a birthday card that she wrote to herself. So passive aggressive. And he says, despite my feelings toward her, I was still about to send her a message. It disgusted him. Yeah, man, I hear you. I do. I hear you.
Yeah. We've got a comment here from Pink Pixie who was saying they don't change, run, leave. I may not have much time left on earth because I stayed. She has stage 3 cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, this can and will make you sick. I know
That's
you
right.
might love him or her, but no contact will help. Please be careful. I have no doubt this abuse made me medically sick. And she said, Dana, she can try to make it to the live stream tomorrow night. I need to go to a doctor's appointment now. I need the support more than ever. Constant pain and a bad prognosis. I'm scared and lost.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Well, we'll see you tomorrow night, Pink Pixie. We'll be thinking about you today. I guess if we can all send some just light and love Pink Pixie's way, that's really challenging to go through this and be struggling with a major illness like that.
Yeah, it really is. And I really do agree with Pink Pixie that this stuff can physically make us sick as well.
Yeah.
There's evidence of it all over the place. I mean, study after study proves it. And I always found it interesting that of all of the, populations, so to speak, the narcissistic abuse survivor community seems to have a very large percentage relative to other, the rest of the world of fibromyalgia, chronic pain, things like this that are, lots of other things, Crohn's, lots of other issues that seem to be common, and that they have linked trauma to these types of developments. And it's really serious. It's no joke. So big hugs and love to you, Pink Pixie. I'm so sorry about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a question from Rebecca here who asks, how do you break up if you're living together?
Good question. I think the smartest thing to do is, personally, I think to be prepared, know what you're going to do if you're going to throw them out or you're going to leave yourself, have everything set up to go into motion the minute you say the words, and then either, depending on the relationship, I mean, if you've been married 20 years and you have kids, it might not be as easy for you to walk out without telling them, but if you can, pack up your stuff and be gone one day and leave a note or not. I mean, I think it just depends on the circumstances. In some cases you might feel obligated, especially if you've had a long-term relationship, more than a year or two, but I think it's a matter of whatever you choose to do, whether you choose to tell them or not in person, be prepared to walk out and be ready to go.
Yep.
Don't leave yourself in a situation where they're going to be able to walk into your house and trash it, or walk into, maybe change the locks if you're the one keeping the house, but then you have to be careful with eviction laws and stuff like that. So I would be prepared to leave if you can. Have the things that are really important to you already out of the house if you can, and just be ready to roll when it's time, so you don't, protect yourself as much as you can. Dana, I know you have some good advice on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's breaking up with a narcissist is a lot like kicking a bee's nest. and you want to have a plan in place before you do that.
Yes.
So, like Angie was saying, if you can get important papers like your birth certificate, important things like that in a safe place before you say anything. I like the idea of having a plan lined up ahead of time. If you can at all set it up to where you have the most control in the situation, so where you're leaving, like versus you trying to get them to leave, you're going to be better off because you only have control over you. So trying to get control over them is going to most likely be an uphill legal nightmare. So if you can be the one to move out, figure out what you're going to keep, what you're going to leave, these kinds of things. It can also really help to not, if you, when you're telling them about why you're breaking up, not making it about them. Just in general, I think that's a good thing for anybody because it's just going to cause a fight. If you're like, well, but you did X, Y, and Z, and I can't handle it anymore, and you're verbally abusive, and and the cheating, and it's just going to wind up in blame shifting and accusations and more verbal and emotional abuse and all kinds of, and it can escalate and get dangerous. So I would put it on you and just say something like, the more I've thought about it, I don't think that, I'm not ready for a relationship or this relationship. I have some things that I just need to work through before I can be emotionally available, even though like that's kind of true, but it's not, because it's not like you're trying to be emotionally available to them. It's like there's things that you need, boundary standards and deal breakers, stuff that you've got to work on in order to be in a truly emotionally intimate relationship, but it wouldn't be with them. So
you could make it as simple as I'm not happy, but here's the thing too, I think, is that we want to talk to them about the problems because we want closure and justification and validation. We want them to know, and we want them to say, you're right, I was a terrible person, I'm sorry, but they won't. In fact, it will go exactly like Dana described. It will be a horrible fight. And if you're lucky enough to still keep going out and still leave and not have them convince you to stay for the 18,000th time, if that's a thing for you, then, it's not worth it. It's not worth trying to get closure from them or validation from them. The truth is, and I say this to clients all the time, if you look back at the time you've spent with that person, chances are that you know exactly how they're going to respond to literally anything you say. So if you can think to yourself, well, I want to express to them that, they have been verbally abusive, or they have been emotionally cruel, or whatever, or I didn't like that they cheated, or whatever, or I wish they would just tell me the truth once in a while, then ask yourself, what's it going to play out like? How's it going to play out? And imagine yourself going through that conversation, because the fact of the matter is, at least in my experience and in many other people's experience, you know exactly what they're going to say. They are predictable. I mean, within reason. They're either going to, if they really think you're going to leave, they're going to try to keep you around by promising to change, or they're going to go ballistic on you and they're going to scream and yell and act like it's all your fault and make you feel guilty and everything else. And some combination of that might also happen. It of course depends on the narcissist and whether they're covert or not, but ultimately there will be nothing positive that's going to come of that. So that's why I don't recommend, and I'm sure why Dana doesn't recommend anything real serious in that way, trying to get validation.
You're not going to get closure. You're not going to get the answers you seek. You're not going to get the apologies. You're not going to get any of that. And I think if you can really fully embrace that, and that's difficult to just be like, wow, I've suffered like injustice after injustice and all kinds of BS over the years. And I'm never going to be heard. I'm never going to get that validation. I just have to pack my stuff and just go and just squeeze out the lessons I can from this and just drive on, because that's the problem with people like that, is there is no acknowledgement or sincere validation or working as a team for any of this.
Right.
So.
Right. Exactly. Good stuff. Okay. Hey, Mari. Mari says, my husband fooled me another year. It's been almost 2 weeks ago, I had to call the cops. As a result, I now have an order of protection against him. Next step is divorce. Congratulations on that divorce part. I'm so sorry that you got stuck for another year, but I'm glad to see that you're back on track and that you're trying to get yourself healthy and free. I'm so sorry that you got stuck. Anything for Mari today, Dana?
Yeah, just congratulations on the next chapter in your life.
It will
And
be a beautiful thing.
yeah, it really will.
Yeah.
You want to do one more question, or do you need to run?
Oh, good point. Good point. Let's go ahead and do one more if you've got one, and then we'll.
Okay, I've got one. It's from Glitter Girl, who says, Trisha and her were wondering why, even though that they know they're in a toxic relationship, there's two people with the same question.
Okay.
Why they're in a toxic relationship, why they can't pull the plug and go no contact. Thoughts?
Well, a couple things. Trauma bonding, of course, where we're kind of sort of almost kept physically addicted to them because, of course, any sort of love affects the same part of the brain as drugs or alcohol, and that dopamine center we kind of talked about before, the way that we're connecting. What are they? Neurotransmitters.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side of that, when we're talking about a toxic relationship, we have lots of spikes of adrenaline, and then we get the dopamine on the come down. And then a lot of times our brain, our body isn't as able to naturally produce the dopamine because we don't really even get happy unless we've just been, freed of an argument or whatever. So that's a really non-scientific, scientific explanation. But what it comes down to is it's addiction. And you're physically addicted to that person because of the abuse. It's kind of like, it's Stockholm syndrome, essentially. You're almost like a captive of that person in that way. And I know Dana has better words for you on this because I'm all over the place right now. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, I thought you were very clear with that. I mean, that's what it is. It's the trauma bonds. And one of the reasons these bonds can be so deep in terms of abuse is because when things are decent, especially if you're experiencing a lot of love bombing where, the sex is amazing, the chemistry is amazing, they're telling you everything that you want to hear, that's intoxicating.
Yes.
And especially if you have all of these kind of unhealed vulnerabilities present. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, I've shared before, for me, my hook was I had been walking around since childhood feeling unloved and invisible, basically. Mm-hmm. And so every single time I got around somebody who made me the center of their world, I just ate that up. Yeah. And I felt everything felt wonderful and perfect and all of this stuff. But then, then the real them would surface. And then but I had a hard time letting go because when things were decent, I was getting a lot of those basic needs met that had been unmet for so long. And so I was able to finally break that cycle once I was able to realize what were these needs that this relationship was needing from me and how could I meet these in a more healthy way and work towards resolving this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Good stuff, Dana. All right. I want to just read this comment from Nicole Angelina because I think it's a great point that is related to what we're talking about and a good ending point. She says, they always say you're doing exactly what they are doing. It's a tactic. Don't fall for it. And I think I read that wrong initially, but it's also a good point. I thought I was reading something about the drug thing, but yeah, that's also a good point. Don't fall for their tricks. So
actually, and real quick on the tail end of that, somebody else that asked a question and I lost it here, but about whether or not they can make you kind of feel like you're a narcissist or manipulative. And I think Angie and I both just wanted to validate that. Yeah, that's very common. That yes. For them, it's always everybody else's fault. You're the one that's too emotional. You're being manipulative. You're being controlling. Yep. Possessive, jealous, insecure, blah, blah. And especially if they're pushing all your buttons and then waiting for you to react. And then it's like you react when they try to punish you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then really quick on the same note, what they do a lot of times is they'll come through and they'll try to make you crazy. And then, yep. And then you go crazy and then they come in and comfort you. Watch out. I used an example in a previous video where, let's say you hate the color red, they paint your bedroom red and you walk in the house and you're freaked out by the red bedroom and you say, what do you mean? I don't like the color red. Why would you paint my bedroom red? And they go, oh, I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. Let me paint it blue for you. And now they're going to, comfort you because this is a way that they not only distract from something they may have done wrong or whatever, but it's also a way, they're creating chaos and then soothing the chaos that keeps you addicted, in a way.
Yeah.
So, because they comfort you. So, and fix the problem that they created. So that's also a good red flag to watch for when you're in any sort of situation. Okay. I want to keep talking, guys, because I absolutely love hanging out with you. But unfortunately, I've got to jump into a client session. So Dana and I are going to have to wrap up for now. But as always, we'll be on Dana's channel next week at the same approximate time, which is Tuesdays at 12:30 Central, 1:30 what, Pacific?
Eastern.
Eastern. I'm time zone challenged, y'all.
I am too. Okay.
Right on. And again, Dana can be found at thriveafterabuse.com, Thrive After Abuse here on YouTube and all over the internet. You can find me here. You can find me queenbeing.com. Angie Atkinson, y'all know me. Okay. Have a lovely Tuesday, everybody. We will see you next week, and I'll be back later this week with another video.
Bye.
Bye. All right.